Find a comfy seat, plenty of seating over here on the scenic side of the building. Enjoy the scenic views and the Yarra River. And it stopped raining, which is wonderful. Cool. How's that looking, Zoe? Looks good? Well, in that case, folks, hopefully everyone had a great lunch. Thank you for coming back to join us. So our next trio of speakers, kicking off, we have Zoe Qi, who is the lead software engineer from Latitude Financial. Zoe, I think you're talking about migrating customer identity. Please come up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Before I start, just want to say thank you, Adrian, for inviting me to such a great identity event. So forgive me if I make any mistake. It's the first time speaking in front of so many identity groups. I am Zoe, coming from Latitude Financial Services, and I'm now the software engineer lead. My team is helping managing the customer-facing identity platform. Today, my topic would be the migration of customer identity and access management. Before I start all the topics, just want to help recap two fundamental concepts. What is IAM and why is IAM so important? I'm sure everyone already know IAM refers to the framework with all the policies, technology, strategies used to manage the digital identities and to manage the access to resources. And why is IAM so important? After so many famous incidents, etc., we know IAM is helping us mitigate the security risk by following the least privileged principle. And also IAM, some key components like multi-factor authentication is just adding another security layer for customers to protect their data. IAM also plays an important role regards to the audit. So because of the audit trails and logs, it can making sure the company can demonstrate their capability to show what customer has accessed what resources at which time. So after these two concepts, I'm going to introduce three subtopics. First one is why do we need for migration? Then the key considerations when we're planning the migration solution. And the last one is to briefly introduce 4 migration strategies. Let's start. First one, why do we need for migration? I have listed down 5 points. I know that there should be more than that. And I personally divide them into 3 groups. First one is technology driven. So in current time, everyone working from home a lot, and we use a lot of mobile devices. A remote network becomes super popular. So we know there's a technology needs. We need to make sure our IAM solution is scalable and flexible. And the second driven reason is called regulatory or compliance reasons. So we all need to making sure, imagine a company owns all Australia citizens' PII data, and they are subject to the general data protection regulation. If there's a specific requirement saying you must satisfy these, you must implement these encryption solutions, can we always keep up to date? That could be the main drive for us to move to a next modern platform. And the third reason is the business drive. Imagine there's acquisition happens or there's a strong business growth. We can expecting a huge growth in the use base, whether the current IAM solution is still sufficient or some fancy features like everyone is talking about zero trust and device contacts and geolocation tracking. These all can force the business to transition to a new platform. After talking about these reason or trigger points, the next part is the key considerations. So I have listed down 5 main key considerations based on my own working experience. So let's assume we already, as an organization, we already decide to do a migration and a new IAM platform is chosen. So the very beginning point is to clarify what are the requirements. So the first thing we need to check is the use base because migrating 10,000 customer versus migrating 10 million customer could totally change our strategy. And next part is the data source. Where are the data comes from? How reliable are they? They are all very important. And next part is still inside the requirements. I mentioned the data structure. So by the time we do the migration, we need to be super clear what can be migrated, what cannot be. So I know in some IAM solutions, password is something we cannot move out. After we clarify the requirements, the next piece is the user types. I find it super useful when we just break down the user into different groups. Say we're trying to migrate customer from platform A to platform B. If they are all new to the platform B, that's easy, happy pass. But what happens if this same customer is already known to both platforms? When the attributes are matching, easy job. But if there's some data mismatching, especially the key authentication method like key authentication attributes like email address, mobile number, how we want to deal in them. After the user types, we also need to think about what the user journey looks like. Does the company want to offer customer enough capability to do self-service? We want to support them to do unlock accounts, reset password, or self-onboarding, etc. thing. The benefit of that is super obvious because it will reduce the burden to our IT support teams, and customer may be satisfied with a very short, onboard process. But the drawback could be some potential impact to the user error. Say if the company doesn't want customer to do the self-service, they want to do a seamless migration happening in the background. We can foresee there will be extra effort required to provision everything and a better communication happens. And we also need to be super careful about user expectation. If the new journey looks totally different and some customer already get familiar with the old one for like 10 years, they may refuse to migrate. So that's what risk we need to consider. The fourth part is the compatibility with existing systems. It's really up to your target platform. Some platform may already offer you a fancy solution just within one click or within 10 minutes, work them. That's fabulous. But sometimes it's not the truth. We need to do extra engineering work, a lot of coordinating to making sure the transition actually happens. By the time we're doing that, we need to be more familiar with what's the infrastructure or system the company is using, because say if the company is already on AWS and the new solution is on Google Cloud, it could maybe double our run cost. And last but not least is the maintenance efforts. I personally found this one is very easy to be missed because everyone just focus on delivering the whole thing and finish the transition, but they ignore how much extra effort required after we do all the job. And I remember Sue mentioned that it could be turned very horrible with all the vendor left and engineers just sit there and, wow, what shall we do? These are all the key considerations we can consider during the migration. And next part, I'm going to jump to 4 migration strategies. This is my favorite part. The very beginning one is big bang approach, or some people call that batch processing. So it means we finish all the user migration or the application transition within a single and comprehensive event. The advantage of that is it will require a relatively short timeline. If that transition happens, everyone happy. We don't need to worry all the maintenance for the legacy platform, and there's no more ongoing maintenance, etc. But in the meantime, we need to well plan that. Imagine something goes wrong in the middle and everyone working in the midnight and notice, ooh, this won't work. Do we have a fallback plan? That's something we want to avoid, and that's why we mentioned this strategy would have some higher risk in case something goes wrong and limited fallback option. The next strategy we're going to touch is the phased migration. Phased migration means we can divide the whole migration into small phases, into different phases. Can start migration a small group of people. Some could from internal QA teams or some pilot users. Let them feel how it looks like, whether there are any issues, and until all the potential issues are detected and fixed, we are more comfortable to do the fully migration. The disadvantage of this one is it is going to prolong the whole timeline. And also it is more complexity when we're managing the multiple phases simultaneously. The third strategy is a bit similar to the phase one. It's called parallel deployment. So we just keep running the legacy system, and in the meantime, start to provision a new platform, and we only finish all the transition until the new platform is ready. Advantage of that is it will have the minimum impact to the customer experience. Say the new platform is not ready. We need to do more testing and we found some new issue. Customer can still log into their legacy platform and finish some daily actions. And also it provides us a fallback option if something goes wrong. The disadvantage of this is it is more complicated and also it is more resource intensive regards to the infrastructure and manpower and maintenance efforts. And we also need to be careful about the data synchronizing because we are managing two separate IAM systems. We cannot making sure all the PII data are static or the access policy can never change. That's not the truth. So be careful when choosing this one. The last strategy I'm going to talk about is just-in-time provisioning. Just-in-time provisioning means the migration gets triggered based on the user activity. When user try to authenticate and access the resources, the whole provision happens. The provision could be the account provisioning and some access policy set up. Advantage of this one is there's less administration work overhead, and also it can have lower security risk about the data leak. Disadvantage of this one is because the provision only triggered based on the user activity, we have some dependency on the source system or the target system. If one of them goes wrong and we just trigger something and that event cannot be successful, how can we deal with that edge case? These are all the 4 strategies I mentioned, and I also create a table to compare them in 5 different dimensions: the migration timeline, the risk level, resource required, and disruption to operations, and fallback options. Just a small quiz. I made a mistake in column 4, disruption to operations. So does anyone want to have a guess which one is wrong? So I mentioned Big Bang has the minimum disruption to operations, same as parallel, and just-in-time has potential significance. No? Yes. Thank you. Yes. Don't think Big Bang has a minimum in disruption. But that can be controversial. Some people can consider from different aspects. Always arguments. Cool, that's everything I have mentioned today. Just a small conclusion. We have mentioned the importance of the migration and the strategic consideration we were designing the solution. And last is how we want to select the strategy. Any questions?
Any questions for Zoe, folks? Here. Let's toss the box. So do put your face very close to the microphone works.
That was great. For a customer identity CIAM perspective, as opposed to just a normal workforce IAM perspective, are there any kind of specific challenges to customer identity that you think would you'd have to factor in for a migration?
Wow, good question. I think based on my experience, the biggest challenge is the mismatching, the data discrepancy. So comparing to the new one, old one, as I mentioned, say we already have some use case, the customer is known to both systems and their mobile number could be different. And all the source system has unverified personal information. How we want to handle that in a better way, and without sacrificing the user experience. That's always a challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
How did you handle that, Zoe?
In progress, that's a secret.
Which of the migration strategies or combination thereof have you chosen, Zoe?
I just did a recap this morning on my way, and I realized within my short time in the career, I have basically touched every strategy I mentioned here. So some people like the big bang approach because of the tight deadline. Some people prefer the just-in-time. Last work for sure, but I noticed that could be a pain when you cannot do a clean cut. So the legacy system running there forever, you always have to have some dirty logic in your code to handle that, which is not good.
Any other questions for Zoe from the audience? Otherwise, I've got one primed. No? Oh, think of your questions, folks. We've still got 5 more minutes for Zoe. Zoe, you mentioned there might be some instances where some extra engineering effort may be required, maybe where a feature is missing out of the identity platform. Could you provide some examples?
Extra engineering is needed during the migration or not really?
In the context of what you mentioned earlier. You mentioned sometimes you might need some extra engineering effort.
Wow. Good question. I need to think about it. Just in time, parallel. I think it's the batch process. So I noticed I'm currently in a project. We are considering this approach, and it is noticed there's a lot of conversation happens in the business side, not in the technical team, to just double check and confirm everything from the source system is reliable, verified. If not, what's the use case? Do we want to handle them manually or adding some extra engineering effort?
Excellent. Oh.
Hey Zoe, thanks for the presentation, really good. I think you talked about the phase rollout for the migration. So I think for a CIAM use case, from what we can see, customers are usually less prone to like changes. So what is your like incentive to get customers using something that you deem will be more secure?
What is my motivation to encourage customers?
How do you incentive those customers? Let's say how you kind of like force them to like migrate. Because I think Marty in the morning mentioned that for a workforce like scenario, we can basically just say like give them like extra points or just move that by department. But for CIAM, I think we might need a different strategy.
Yeah, that's really a good question. Because I focus more in technical parts. I notice you always need a better wording because my English isn't that good. I notice to express the same meaning, things can totally different when people hear that. So better communication, find a proper way, whether we want to send users some email notification or some pop-up window in the platform saying, hey, we got this new feature, do you want to try that? It's in a polite way. So naturally that will extend the timeline as I mentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Zoe? Oh, yep.
I'm glad you didn't grow it. So you mentioned that you've had a go at all of them. Which one was your favorite? Which one do you feel went more smoothly or caused you less headaches?
Good question. Thank you, Sue. I do think about this question. I think my favorite one would be the phased migration. Because comparing to the big bang approach, it is less risk. And also we can allow the internal user and great QA team trying to just play with it, try to attach it, and find out the issues. And also we need to be super careful with the timeline. Just address that in the very beginning. We are going to use the phase, but we have a hard deadline.
It just means a shorter hypercare. So it might not actually change the timelines that much in the end.
let's see.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you.
Any more questions, folks? Going once, going twice. A big round of applause for Zoe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Zoe. Really well.